Okay. So, moving on to the next topic, which is a keynote from Samir Patel. And as I introduce Samir to you, I request Samir if you can switch on your video, unmute your audio, and then be ready on the stage. Samir is the CEO of Sankalp Semiconductor, which is part of HCL now, and has played a key role in setting up Sankalp's global operations in North America and Europe. Samir has a successful stint spanning 16 years at Rambus, where his last held position was Senior Vice President of Engineering. He has also held senior positions at Sun Microsystems, Catalyst, and National Semiconductor. Samir holds a BTech degree in engineering from IIT Mumbai and an MS degree from University of California, Santa Barbara. He is credited with executive courses from Stanford University. Samir, honored to host you, and then you can get started.
Thanks, Naveen. Thanks for that introduction, and good morning to everybody who is in India. Today, I'm going to talk about the trends that to me appear to be more like the democratization of electronics. Let me share my video, my desktop. So hopefully you can see the
Uh,
desktop.
Not yet, Samir.
Not yet. That is a problem. And sorry for that technical difficulties. All right, so I was talking about democratization of electronics. And particularly that will be in semiconductor and that too in chip design, semiconductor design area, where I believe most of the audience, most of the people in this room have spent their good number of professional years. So having said that, let's start. So what important events occurred in 1947? Um, our Independence Day just was few days ago. So obviously the Indian independence. But in the same year, as many of you may already know, the first transistor was invented. And that was just at the beginning of something, the technological sort of progress that humankind has made, which was never seen before. Just in the last 50 years, we have been able to pack more than 10 billion transistors in one package, right? If I'm not saying one chip carefully because you've heard a lot of different talks that talk about multiple cores in the same package, same SIP, etc. But 1 crore time multiplication on number of transistors in a single device, which is just mind-boggling. I don't think of any other technology that has scaled so much in such a short time. What that has done is it has brought our industry where you can say it is a mature industry, um, highly segmented now. Various speakers have talked about from the EDA tool vendors point of view, or there are CPU companies, there are memory companies that we just heard a talk on that. Memory is also, whether it's DRAM or flash, There are foundries, and there are specialty companies that focus on analog or networking or wireless type of products. In all, oops, now my in all, we are generating about $400 to $500 billion of revenue per year. But how did we get here? So what has happened is in 50s and 60s, the basic invention, starting from MOSFET transistor to single chip SRAM or processors or E square PROM, uh, happened in 50s and 60s. In 70s, you saw some of the companies trying to take advantage of this hardware development and bring systems that started to bring computing power in hands of people at work or people even at home. And you can see the beginning of the segmentation of our industry from that point on, where you see the initial early EDA companies, early CPU architectures, workstations that are dedicated for chip design, workstations or more powerful computers that let us do our day-to-day work, whether it's at our office or at home. Networking company, Cisco, well-known company, started in mid 80s. Foundry, TSMC, started in 80s. The EDA sector kind of got more formalized with Cadence and Synopsys sort of taking the center stage. The IP companies, as we call them now, started to emerge in late 80s, early 90s. And this has matured over last 3 decades, where along with the EDA companies and the CPU companies and the specialty companies and memory companies and foundries, we also have smaller companies that do kind of bridging the gaps, filling the gaps type of work, whether it's services or small IP companies or FPGA prototyping, so programming or uh, associated system level work to the semiconductor devices. And the one part that is also very important, in fact, it is even more important than how big a business that we all have built together, is the efficacy of the semiconductor devices to our entire world. Um, what I mean by that is that going forward, if we see, you will see that the boundaries that we have right now will be fading. The world will be changing. In fact, one can argue it has already changed. We have moved from industrial society way beyond information age and now talking about a new world where things will be done in a way that was not even imaginable just 1 or 2 or 3 decades ago. So the way I like to think about this is that the distinct verticals, right? Automotive industry versus electronics industry or an industrial company, old industrial company versus a new software or an internet company. You will see that all these verticals and then very hierarchical horizontals, these will be broken down. The barriers will be broken down. And what you will see in this new world, just as you see a lot of different gadgets and structures, and steel is has been everywhere in the industrial age. I would like to think that semiconductor devices are going to be that steel for the next century. You will see more and more electronics, and that too chips will be everywhere in all our devices, at home, in our pocket, maybe wearables, maybe everywhere. And a lot of people have talked about it. But when the steel is used everywhere, what we are able to do right now, the way we make the chips, will that be enough? Or will we also have to change? Before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about a general philosophical stuff. If you look at the food industry and the transport industry, If you go back 100 years ago, probably most of the people were getting home cooked lunch made by his or her spouse. And life was pretty simple but pretty good. You get a fresh cooked food that you really enjoy. And then came in the necessity of the industrialized world and the platform, which is the local train system in Bombay. And some entrepreneurs took advantage of this and started a business that by no means is a small business. I mean, obviously, it is small compared to some of the stuff we might have heard in the last day and a half. But what I like about this is a necessity of being away from home for lunch. Somebody saw it as an opportunity and turned it into a business which added value, brought efficiencies, or even unlocked new markets. So the way we have been making progress is some things happen, a new technology maybe, or the use of technology that will actually create a platform or an infrastructure. With that new platform and new infrastructure, entrepreneurs will seize opportunities. They will find ways to increase efficiencies, maybe even build new markets. And these in turn will generate new platforms on the top of old platforms. So, this is how successively we have incrementally changed the world in which we live. So, this has also been talked about a lot, billions of interconnected devices. They all may be smart or autonomous and yet interconnected because the central collective intelligence is obviously going to be a lot better than individual intelligence or the smarts that you can put in one device. But as you can see in the chart, unlike personal computer volume or the smartphone's volume, the Internet of Things, it is just a mishmash of a lot of different things. And what this really means is that there is an explosion in variety of devices. Essentially, we are going from technology-driven volume game to a application-driven variety game. And this various applications that are driven by variety of semiconductor devices that are not going to happen if we keep doing things the way we have been doing. So that means our industry, which will be the driver for this change in the larger society, we will also have to change to make this change happen. Like, somebody famous has said that be the change agent if you want to bring the change. Another way of explaining what change is needed, if you really look at this chart, uh, today, to make a new chip or a new system, which is essentially built on few semiconductor chips, costs you uh, north of $100 million just in NRE. So if it is going to cost you 100 million to $1 billion, then you have to for it to make economic sense, you have to target markets where the volume for whatever products you are bringing out is going to be more than 1 million devices, right? Then you can have ASP of $100 or more. Where we need to go is to be able to make devices such that the NRE cost, the upfront cost, is tens of thousands of dollars. If we can do it, then we will open up new markets where the number of units we need to sell can be hundreds or thousands instead of millions. And this chart is not actually made by me or some large semiconductor company. This is the chart that was first shown by person who is heading DARPA. For those who do not know what DARPA is the R&D funding agency of US government's defense department. And what is happening right now is that US government is funding research projects that will help bring this tomorrow happen, that it will be realized, right? And it'll happen in two ways. The one way it will happen is that existing businesses, they have already realized, you might have heard from a lot of these different talks, that going to a new node, so taking advantage of the technological improvements, gives you incrementally smaller and smaller advantages at higher and higher costs. So it is getting harder to compete if you just want to be in this small box of very expensive systems and very expensive chips. So they are already working to expand their market, to bring new devices, the new solutions at a lower cost. And those incremental changes will be also supplemented on the other end by new radical approaches to how we do the designs themselves. And these designs may not use the most advanced nodes, they may use older technologies. And more importantly, they may not use the way to do the chip design the way we have been doing. Fundamentally, the way we have been doing chip design itself could change, and I'm sure it will change. So, main takeaway from this talk, if somebody wants to take, is if you look back in the rear view as you are driving your car, you're not going to go too far. So, same way, please don't tell a youngster or a junior who is going to listen to you, don't tell him that this is how we used to do things, so that's how it must be done. You need to look at whatever we are doing right now, whatever you are doing, your organization is doing, we all are actually doing in various partnerships or relationships that we have between different companies. We have to look at whatever we are doing right now and say and see how we can make it slightly more efficient, slightly more cost effective. Because if we don't do it, somebody else will do it. It's a huge opportunity to take our art or our craft and make it more easily accessible to lot many more people and lot many more applications. Um, so just imagine for a minute, if the semiconductor landscape, we all know how it is right now, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But going forward, the software world is already organized like this. You have a huge stack of interdependent platforms. Now, to serve those platforms, if you had application specific SOCs, systems that you can build entirely on chips using tools that are easily and inexpensively available to people, then they will build these platforms on top of the ASOCs. And these ASOCs themselves, in turn, are built by available solutions for the lower level in actually terms of stacks at a lower level of stack, the CPU cores or the memories or whatever else you need, using again the tools that are easily accessible. And if they're built like this with multiple choices and multiple options, then you can see that variety of ASOCs can build with lower cost and in faster times. And for these IPs or readily reusable blocks, again, ultimately we have to use some node and some foundry. So soft IPs are important. They standardize the way a lot of these blocks interact. And we have standards, some proprietary, but many open standards to build our ASOCs or to build even higher level stacks or bigger systems. But ultimately, at this level, when we talk about realizing the hardware on a like particular chip, we have to pick a foundry and a node, and ultimately those blocks have to be realized in a particular node. And that also, if you had ability or the way to pick and choose the nodes, sometimes 180 nanometer will make a lot more sense than 90 nanometer or 7 nanometer. But we already have a wide variety of choices. What is interesting to me is that this whole um, levels of stack from manufacturing to building application platforms. This is a very people intensive segment. And usually we have focused mostly in bringing products to this world. But going forward, we'll have to think about more what solutions are we bringing. And, as soon as you talk about solutions, yes, doing the designs and, bringing the systems, introducing them for the first time is very important part, but then maintaining them, serving them, working through them throughout end of their lives and improving them, all that is also engineering work that somebody has to do. And I think even actually in yesterday's talk, we talked about there are a lot of different areas where India or Indian companies which are headquartered in India can add value. And I think the lowest hanging fruit right now, if you look at whether we have the skills available, whether we have the infrastructure available, in fact, recent developments, whether you look at the US-China kind of sort of relationships getting colder, or this virus COVID-19, it is making remote working necessity, or even the much more of a global trend, global warming. All these things will make it necessary for the people who are bringing these solutions in the market look at very different ways to bring them more effectively, more like efficiently. And I think this is the place where each one of us and all put together people who are working from India or for India will be able to make a huge impact. We have used this slide a lot at Sankalp, and here I want to say in a slightly different way. I envision India, which will have a number of chip design factories, where a person or a small team or a small system companies, if it needs hardware, and new hardware is only needed if you need the speed. Otherwise, the work can be done in software, or you need sometimes the footprint or the lower power. There are advantages to put things in hardware. But if you need, you should be able to go, just like you can go to foundries today or OSAT companies today, you should be able to go to not one, but multiple of such companies where you can get one step, one phase of what needs to be done, or if needed, entire spec to GDS2 or spec to parts can be done. So now I'll talk a little bit about where I'm spending my time. So at HCL, I'm responsible for semiconductor strategy. And if I want to simply explain what we do, we enable your semiconductor strategy. I'm sure everybody in this room, in this sort of actually virtual room, is affiliated with some company that is working in this area of chip design. And more, each company is thinking whether they want to concentrate in manufacturing corner or tools corner, or are they building a system or a product or a subsystem or an architecture or a platform at certain level. And it is becoming increasingly difficult for a company to play effectively on all the three corners. So they will need to focus more and more into one or at the most two corners. Now, ideally, all this can be done in a fully automated way, like what foundries do these days when they take the mask data and produce the chips. But this is a very people-intensive business, as we talked, and people will be needed to use all these things: the foundries, the tools, the products, the platforms, and produce solutions. And that is the corner. It is not even a corner. It is essentially a glue between all these different things that will make things happen, make things work. And that is the corner in which I think we are focused. I've been actually focused all my life. And obviously, a lot of actually companies have done that. I've put a laundry list of what we call the traditional services, and it is broken down in various areas. And what has happened with this continuous march to scaling down of the transistor, we have unfortunately, we all have become very specialized, very actually compartmentalized, if I use that word. And we have to break those barriers. We have to go beyond that. I think what the world needs now is more generalists, the people who understand more the system level concept, the system level actually problems and challenges. So, as an example, we have already had reasonable success in trying to push this idea of IP as services. What it means is a lot of IPs are already available. They are in open industrial standards like USB or PCI Express or DDR, and they're already available in some nodes. And if somebody can set up a factory to port these IPs from one node to other, or look at it, if a need is there for an IP, whether it is a CPU IP or a memory IP or an interface IP or libraries, but in a node that these IPs are not available in, you don't have to generate it from scratch anymore. In the past, it may have been true because you were doing it for a newer node that nobody had used in the past. But now you will be using more and more older nodes. In the ARM talk I saw, and it was a very interesting chart, they are showing how the older nodes are still in use and how foundries are still making some economic use of very old nodes. Just like IP as services, you can see, and some of the companies are already doing ASICs as services and systems as services. So I would hope that we move beyond this word of product company or an IP company or a services company and thinks in terms of more solutions and services, and who do we need to partner with to bring an incrementally better solution, whether it be in automation, it may be in design, or it may be in validation verification, or everything put together. That is what would enable us to bring the new world where, if I go back to my Mumbai Dabbawala example, now one can say we don't even need Dabbawalas. I can work from home. But then just imagine how much we have changed. Now we have Uber Eats and things like that. So even if you are working from home and at lunchtime, if you want to eat, you have multiple choices. You can order food, and you can order actually variety of foods from variety of sources. So to me, the democratization means having multiple choices, and to be able to make those choice, exercise those choices, obviously as judiciously as we do, better off our offering or our solution will be to the world. So that's the end of my talk, and I'll be happy to take whatever questions we may have, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Samir. That was very good summary that you shared. We have a couple of questions, and maybe let me try to combine them. At least two of them connect. The first one is from Ananta, who asks, will democratization happen in VLSI technology related education and skilling? For example, with focus on online edutech, is it not possible for IITs or others to impact thousands and 10,000s of students remotely And specifically connecting to the second question, it could be in the specialized skills. We have been training in design verification, but it could be in testing, packaging, manufacturing skills.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it actually begins at the educational institutes and the DARPA example, right? So the way this will happen is we will have to build a new. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Samir.
Okay. So we'll have to build new types of engineers who are going to be more generalists, who will not take pride in, yes, I can use this tool or I can do this work in this advanced node, but they understand the concepts and they say, yes, I understand this, no, sort of software aspects, hardware aspects, design aspects, validation, verification aspects. So yes, I do entirely agree that it actually begins at our institutes of education. Yeah.
Okay.
And from there, it can go to all the walks in design, in manufacturing, in assembling, service, whatever.
Right. Good. Thank you, Samir. That was a very different, but very, I would say, analogous to some of the themes that we are talking about. So thank you for sharing your thoughts here. We'll move forward to the next session. But before we go there, on behalf of the IESA team, I would like to take this moment and thank you for your time, efforts, and thought sharing.
Thank you.